What's up, YouTube? Zero here, and today I have an absolutely amazing Espeon and Stoutland deck build in Pokemon TCG Pocket. In this video, I'll go over the deck build that you can see on the left-hand side of the screen. I'll talk about each of these cards individually, and I'll talk about why this deck is absolutely amazing and why you should check it out. Before I get into it, I do want to say if you do enjoy this video, feel free to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button for more Pokemon TCG content. I do a bunch of other video games, so feel free to check those out as well. Thank you so much in advance for hitting that subscribe button. It does really help out me and my channel. So without further ado, let's talk about this deck build. Now, this deck build is a spin on my Stoutland Gallade EX deck build. The reason why it is so great is, one, Stoutland is absolutely phenomenal, and Espeon feeds off of Stoutland's ability. So it's a great combination. Stoutland plays well with a few Pokemon that do damage the more energy Pokemon on your opposing team have. So let's talk about each of these cards, and first I want to talk about Espeon because I made this deck because I wanted a deck with Espeon in it, and some people are going to say, well, why not Sylveon? And that's because I don't have Sylveon yet. So I wanted to create something with Espeon. Let's talk about Espeon. Espeon for one, only one, which is really nice, Psychic Energy. You have Energy Crush. Energy Crush is a move that does 20 times. So of course, this is dependent upon something, and it's going to be something your opponent does. So Energy Crush, this attack does 20 damage for each energy attached to all of your opponent's Pokemon. That's very interesting. It's not just the active Pokemon, it is all of your opponent's Pokemon. So regardless of if they're in the active slot, on the bench, or combination of both, all of the energy that your opponent has equipped on his or her Pokemon are going to be factored into Energy Crush. So if it's 4 energy, Espeon's going to deal 80 damage. If it's 5 energy, Espeon is going to deal 100 damage. That's absolutely awesome because Espeon can really hit hard depending upon how much energy your opponent has equipped on his or her Pokemon. So that's absolutely awesome, and Espeon can end up doing a lot of damage for a small amount of energy required. Only 1 energy for Energy Crush, which is really awesome. You can really hit like a truck against some very powerful Pokemon and Pokemon teams that require a lot of energy. So that's absolutely phenomenal. Espeon does hit Giratina teams fantastically hard because Giratina is building up all of that energy on the bench. Sometimes it's combined with Darkrai, and opponents are equipping energy on Darkrai and Giratina at the same time. So they can build up energy, but all in all, that's going to be just making your Espeon more powerful, which is absolutely awesome. On top of that, for those of you who don't know, Espeon and abilities that factor in energy on your opponent's team are enhanced if your opponent is utilizing Superior. That doubles the amount of energy. So you're going to see it in this clip. My opponent has Superior, which makes my Espeon even more powerful, which is absolutely awesome. You can deal a ton of damage if you are facing a Superior deck. Now, those are few and far between at this point in the meta, but if you do end up facing one, Espeon's going to be even more powerful. Espeon is going to be found in the Eevee Grove packs, for those of you who don't know. And of course, you're going to need an Eevee with the Espeon. So I'm going to have 2 Eevees, a pretty basic Eevee that came in the Eevee Grove packs. For 1 colorless energy is collect. You're going to draw a card. Getting more cards out of your deck is always going to be useful, so drawing cards is going to be great. You can get to the Pokemon or other cards you need in your deck a little bit quicker. So I do like this Espeon where you can draw a card to get towards the Pokemon or cards in your deck a little bit quicker. Next, I want to talk about Stoutland, the other Pokemon in this deck. And Stoutland is absolutely phenomenal. I'll be honest, I'm surprised I don't see Stoutland more often. Now, Stoutland is a very interesting Pokemon, but it can really throw off opponents' strategies and really force them into adding more energy than they would have normally liked onto a Pokemon. So Stoutland's attack is 2 colorless energy Sharp Fang for 70 damage. That's not where Stoutland shines. Stoutland shines in its ability, Guard Dog Visage. And as this ability, as long as this Pokemon is in the active spot, attacks used by your opponent's active Pokemon cost 1 colorless energy more. So this is going to force your opponent to adding an energy onto their Pokemon in the active slot if they want to attack. This can really throw off an opponent's strategy. It's absolutely awesome. It forces your opponent to use an extra turn to equip energy on their Pokemon in the active slot. And this can really throw off your opponent's strategy. On top of this, forcing your opponent to add an extra energy onto a Pokemon is going to play into Espeon's hands. Of course, Espeon doesn't care what Pokemon on the opposing team have an energy. However, if your opponent does see that you have a Pokemon such as Espeon that require energy to do a lot of damage, your opponent may forego equipping energy onto their Pokemon on the bench, of course, depending on which Pokemon on the bench they have, which is going to limit your ability to deal damage. However, Stoutland is going to try and avoid that by forcing your opponent to equip more energy on their Pokemon in the active slot just to be able to attack. So again, this does multiple things for your strategy as you're facing an opponent. One, it's going to eat into your opponent's strategy. Your Pokemon that you're facing, your opponent's Pokemon now has to equip more energy just to attack. This is going to slow them down equipping energy on Pokemon on the bench, or it's going to force them to equip more energy so you can power up your Espeon rather than just foregoing equipping energy in the first place. So these two Pokemon, Stoutland and Espeon, do work really well with each other. Stoutland works great with Pokemon of this type of nature in general. Stoutland also works great as a staller Pokemon, as a Pokemon that you could put out there forcing your opponent into a strategy they may not like or delaying their strategy, which is really great. Again, I'm surprised I haven't seen Stoutland more in the meta just because Guard Dog Visage is a really great ability, forcing your opponent to equip more energy than he or she would normally like onto their active Pokemon just to attack. Stoutland is going to be found in the Extra Dimensional Crisis packs. Then I do have one Herdier, which is in the Extra Dimensional Crisis packs as well. Pretty basic. I just have one of those. I do have one Herdier and 2 rare candies to try and evolve into Stoutland just a little bit quicker. And of course, you need Lillipup because Lillipup is the basic of the Stoutland line. That's also going to be found in the Extra Dimensional Crisis packs. Rare candy is going to be important because you can evolve into Stoutland a little bit quicker. I mentioned it before in my videos, but I will mention it briefly for those of you who don't know what rare candy does. Rare Candy is a card where if you have a basic Pokemon in the field of play for at least one turn, you have Rare Candy in your hand, and you have the stage 2 of that basic Pokemon, you can forego the stage 1. In this case, you're foregoing Herdier, so you can evolve into Stoutland a little bit quicker. Again, doing that is awesome because you're going to slow down your opponent's strategy by making them equip 1 extra energy in that active slot. So it's absolutely awesome for that. Rare Candy is a phenomenal card. Rare Candy is going to be found in the Celestial Guardians packs. Next, a couple of basic cards that are in pretty much every deck. Pokeball, allowing you to draw basic Pokemon, and then Professor's Research, allowing you to draw 2 cards. Of course, it's important to get your cards out of your deck as quickly as possible and into your hand so you can implement your strategy. The strategy for this deck is simple. Get Stoutland in that active slot, forcing your opponent to equip more energy. have Espeon ready on the bench when needed to come out and deal massive amounts of damage, thanks to your opponent having all of that energy equipped on their Pokemon, active Pokemon, and bench Pokemon, because it all adds into Espeon's calculation. Next, I'm going to talk about a couple of other Pokemon that I do, or Pokemon cards that I love having, Sabrina and Cyrus. These two cards are staples in a lot of my decks, and this deck is no different. Sabrina is going to switch out your opponent's active Pokemon to the bench. Your opponent has to choose what Pokemon on the bench that they put in that active slot, but Stoutland is phenomenal with Sabrina. Stoutland forces your opponent to equip more energy on their active Pokemon. This leaves Pokemon on their bench vulnerable because they may not have the energy on those Pokemon to retreat. So you might force a Pokemon to the active slot that's going to have to be there for a few turns because your opponent is unable to make them retreat. So I absolutely love Sabrina. Again, it helps slow down your opponent's strategy, allowing you to implement your strategy and allowing you to implement more damage. Sabrina is going to be found in the Genetic Apex Charizard packs. This deck also couples really well with Cyrus. Espeon has the opportunity of dealing a lot of damage, absolutely, but sometimes you're not going to be dealing a ton of damage, whether your opponent just doesn't have the energy equipped, or whether you're dealing damage with Stoutland. 70 is decent, but it's not amazing amount of damage. So you might be dealing a little bit of damage, chipping away at your opponents with the damage that you're dealing. Your opponents may, in turn, retreat those Pokemon that have chipped away damage. Cyrus is going to force those enemies to push those Pokemon into the active slot. Cyrus, you switch in one of your opponent's bench Pokemon that has damage on it to the active slot. This is going to make sure that opponent's Pokemon that have damage on it can't hide on the bench, and you can more easily take out those Pokemon. So I absolutely love Cyrus. It's still a phenomenal card. It's been a phenomenal card since it came out, and it's fantastic for this deck. And Cyrus is going to be found in the Space-Time Smackdown Palkia packs. Last but not least, I have one Ilima in this deck. Ilima, you put one of your colorless Pokemon that has damage on it into your hand. This is going to increase the survivability of your Stoutland. The goal, the hope, and the dream is your Stoutland is in the active slot to start. Of course, you evolve into it, but you start with your Lillipup, you get to your Stoutland. Your Stoutland is forcing your opponent to equip a lot of energy on their active Pokemon. Your Stoutland is there to take a little bit of damage as well. You have your Espeon on the bench ready to go. After your Stoutland takes enough damage and you feel confident that your Espeon can get into that active slot and start dealing a decent amount of damage, you retreat your Stoutland, you put your Espeon into that active slot. You retreat your Stoutland with the Ilima, so you save it from all of that damage, you put it into your hand, and then you deal a bunch of damage with your Espeon. It's a fantastic strategy. It does sometimes take a little bit to work because I do only have one Ilima, but when you do grab that Ilima and you're pulling your Stoutland back, it's phenomenal. It's also great. Of course, you can lose a Stoutland and not be dead in the water because you have two Stoutlands, one Ilima. So you can always at least save one of your Stoutlands. I like to save the first point, but if I can't save the first point, at least I can save the second or third point by pulling my Stoutland back and letting my Espeon deal the damage. This is an absolutely phenomenal deck and takes advantage of your opponent having to equip extra energy. Stoutland, again, as mentioned earlier, works really well with Pokemon that feed off of your opponent having a lot of energy. So Espeon, Gallade EX, Alakazam, Raichu, or Lowen Raichu EX. Stoutland works insanely well with all of those cards. Espeon is no different. There are a lot of ways of utilizing Stoutland in the game. but this deck is phenomenal and I've had a lot of fun with it. Espeon's a great card when your opponent has to equip a lot of energy onto their Pokemon. There are a lot of fantastic Pokemon that is still prevalent in the meta that require a lot of energy to attack. Stoutland's going to force them into more energy, and your Espeon is going to take advantage of it. Darkrai EX, Giratina, Buzzwole, a couple of the big ones. Espeon's going to really take advantage of that and deal 80 or 100 damage based off of the Pokemon. So it's really great. Charizard included. Charizard is one of the biggest users of energy, so you can really deal a lot of damage to these cards. And losing an Espeon or losing a Stoutland isn't the end of the world, because this deck is a non-EX deck. I love creating non-EX decks for two reasons. One, I still hate dealing with Oricorio, as it's a phenomenal card to put a stop to EX Pokemon. I'm gonna admit I do use Oricorio. I love using it, but I hate facing it. Two, outside of dealing with Oricorio, if you lose one of your cards, it's not the end of the world. Losing an EX card on top of losing 2 points, you're typically losing a lot of energy as well, because typically you're equipping a lot of energy on your EX Pokemon. So you're not losing a lot of energy. Espeon requires 1 energy. It's good to go really quickly. Stoutland requires 2 energy. It's good to go really quickly. So you can implement your strategy really quickly and start attacking really fast with these 2 Pokemon, which I love as well. We are coming down to the end of the video, but let me know in the comments section what you think of this combination. Is it one you're going to use? Is it one you've already been using? Let me know in the comment section. Let me know what substitutions you'd make in this deck to make it even better. If there's a Pokemon you'd like to see a deck centered around, let me know and I'll get it done. I hope y'all enjoyed this video. Again, hit that thumbs up button and subscribe to the channel for more Pokemon TCG content. Well, until next time, peace.